Welcome to the Recovery Stories podcast, bringing you stories of hope, healing, and triumph over the bondage of addictions, mental health struggles, trauma, and dysfunctional family systems. Our courageous storytellers have chosen to live their journey out loud in order to show others that they don't have to suffer in silence. The stories you will hear are raw, real, and may involve graphic and triggering content. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or are ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer. I'm your host. We're so glad that each and every one of you have joined us, whether you're listening or watching live or on replay. We're glad that you're here. We are just wrapping up the end of November, Men's Health Awareness Month, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate by talking to somebody who has a really tremendous platform speaking to men's health issues, specifically mental health and eating disorders, Michael Marjama. Did I say your last name right?
Yeah, close. You just say it really fast. It's Marjama, unless you're from the South and you can just say Marjama. That one works too, I guess, when I go to events down there.
I'm for the South. I guess we do get a little pass sometimes when we screw people's names.
Yeah, it works a little bit. It's good. Yeah, I've had the worst ones. It kind of looks like marijuana, so I get that every once in a while. So I try to keep it light, events and stuff like that. I mean, there's bigger fish to fry than whether or not my last name's pronounced correctly or not. So.
Well, it's absolutely great to have you on here. I know I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. I've heard parts of it before, and I'm looking forward to hear the whole thing. So let's just dive right in. Where are you from, and what were your earliest aspirations? What did your young life look like in the family that you were born into?
Sure. So born and raised in kind of the Sacramento area, kind of Northern California, a place called Granite Bay in the suburbs, in between Sacramento and Tahoe, and grew up, good childhood, nothing, I guess the average family, parents and brother and sister. And, grew up, my dad was in construction. My mom was a nurse practitioner, and, they just kind of worked their weeks, and my dad, working all the time. And kind of came from a long line of really strong men. We think of, very, idealistic in terms of what I guess the ideal man would look like. Very strong, hardworking, diligent, the things that we value, in masculinity. And that was very much, I guess, from stereotypically was what I grew up in, and very nurturing grandmothers and mothers. So, when someone says, you had a rough childhood, I didn't. We all come through our things. And for me, it was, I played youth sports, and dad worked a few jobs to try to make that happen and put a jersey on my back and things like that. So, very grateful. I had a loving and supporting family that, I guess it's probably better than most. So,
yeah. So I think it's interesting, it's easy for people when we hear stories of adversity, and somebody struggled and had things, real strong, obvious challenges as a young person, to look at those and say, well, duh, of course they, ended up having struggles and problems later in life. But people with a story like yours, I think it's fascinating because, we see that, young childhood, what do they call them? The ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences aren't the only things that, if you don't have an ACE, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to live a life without, trials and issues.
The funny thing is everyone does, right? We act like ACEs is revolutionary or something, we act like all this stuff. And we, I don't say I have a problem with the clinical side, or stereotypical side, but I have a problem when we start taking things and we start trying to label everything. And it's like, what's a trauma? And someone's like, well, is being sexually assaulted a trauma? Yeah, of course it is. Is it, and I'm not negating those things. I'm not saying that they're any less or more than anything else. But I mean, in my story, I got dumped by a chick because she felt bad for me. And I had her friend come up to me and say that. Well, yeah, is that a traumatic thing? Yeah, sure it is. Because now you just got completely denied. Like, I'm not comparing it to being raped, but like in the same sense, like, yeah, if you're sexually assaulted, that's legitimately trauma. If you're in domestic violence, yes, like no one would argue those are traumas. But how are we going to argue that you're not affected if you're expecting your mom or dad to say, I love you, and they don't?
Yeah.
How does that not affect I'm not even caring about child, anybody. I think that's where we need to take the point of, whether it's eating disorders, whether it's anything within mental health, anything in health in general, it's not, they're the symptom. They are not the cause. It is the symptom of something. And a lot of times, are we emotionally intelligent enough? Are we willing? When do we hit that point that we're sick and tired of being sick and tired? That we hit that point that goes, why am I doing this? Why do I keep revolving? Why do I keep going on this merry-go-round? Why am I coming back? And what is the root cause of that? And when we start looking at things that way, I think it's a little bit more interesting. And so going through, I guess when you start thinking about it, when you start jumping into recovery, isn't that what you're kind of doing? Is you're almost going back and saying, I'm interested in doing why I do what I do. Is it the stupid horoscope that told me I should do this? We all look at things, and I think that's where it gets interesting.
Absolutely. So when did things get interesting for you?
Well, you see, forward. this is what self-reflection is all about, right? Am I a huge journal? I mean, I think this is, we probably, talk a little about story, but eating disorders and mental health, and we start, diving in a little bit more. Like, I remember going into treatment, and it was just like, if you don't eat anything, you're going to lose your menstrual cycle, and in your room with the girls, and I'm like the only guy in there, and I'm sitting there going like, not really worried about it. Like it's a different vibe for me. So
before we get there, I've got, that spikes a really good question for me. I've heard this said many times that, eating disorders are a female issue. What do you say to that?
Are problems a female issue? Are problems a male issue?
Oh, okay.
I know that, but what I'm saying, at the end of the day, you say, do you deal with problems? Yeah, eating disorders. I can go to anybody, right? We can go to any clinician. Are eating disorders are they the symptom, or is that the root? Why? They're all going to say it's the symptom. It's the symptom of something. So if it's not the problem, and we know that the problems or I wouldn't say problems, the triggers to eating disorders, if we really get down to the root causes, they are not gender specific.
Right.
Just like any issue, almost any issue, any illness, anything that's happening, it's not really gender specific. Now, menstrual cycle, men, not going to deal with it. However, that's just one part of, the whole outcome of symptom physically. So it's mental health. We all have brains. It's not just like, oh, we all struggle with something. And that's where the destigmatization, the bringing this back down to, okay, how do we talk about this with all the fluff? And that's where, when I travel around and spoke all the time more, I got tired of the fluff. I got tired of the raw fluff. And I wanted to get down to root cause, and to be honest with you, I struggled again. You start falling back into relapse stuff, as I'm sure you being in it know. It doesn't just go to one gender specific. It doesn't go to one thing. I want us to be with eating disorders, with mental health, to be allow people to see where they're at in their self-reflection journey, and when they find that, you're there to allow the support system to kick in. If that makes sense. So is it gender specific? No. But if we really want to go down rabbit holes, girls tend to reach puberty faster than boys. Tend to. So within the scope is when bodies are changing earlier, there tends to be identity within junior high, elementary school, high schools as our bodies start changing. How do we fit into our own body? Because our body starts changing, and then other people's bodies are changing and mine not's changing. So it tends to be that we see eating disorders predominantly portrayed in younger women naturally because they're happening sooner. So the prevalence to have them diagnosed is sooner because that's where the big microscope is. But if we were to take that and literally take it way back out, we would actually see that it affects more people than obviously the stereotypical population, right? So people on the outside don't see that. So I guess to answer your question, is it stereotypically true? Sure, but it's not even close to being correct.
Right. That's a great way of putting it. When it comes to, because you hit on such a hot button issue there, the destigmatization, and you've got the root causes versus actually what's the manifestation, and the manifestation is what's causing has the potential to cause such physical harm. If we're really talking about it, I believe it's eating disorders are the number one cause of fatality of psychiatric, like the number one psychiatric disorders that cause the highest number of deaths each year. And so in looking at the ability, so I'm a recovering addict alcoholic, and for me, it's for somebody like me, I don't know if it becomes more obvious quicker, that I'm struggling, because things start to get affected all around me and whatnot. My decision making, my all that stuff, and it affects your brain in a different way. But for men, the shame, and I wonder if you'd speak on for a second, like when it comes to seeking help or admitting that there's a problem with eating disorders, do you see more of a shame issue with admitting as a man that you have an eating disorder and that you need help, than what is socially acceptable for women?
Yeah. But largely because you have to flip the narrative, right? So if I were to tell the story of a man that let's start with eating disorder being the symptom, right? We're saying that I'm using food rather than alcohol, substance, right? Like, so if we were to flip the script entirely and we were to take out, this is what I mean by the fluff. If we take out all the fluff and go, okay, why is someone doing blow? Why is someone smoking cigarettes when they're 16 years old? Are they doing it because they want to? Sure, there's many different reasons. Some of the reasons are because people feel like it curbs their appetite. Now, they may not be controlling their food, but they may be doing it. They may be using other things. Why do men use steroids? Are they doing it because some want to lift more weight and they want to be quote unquote stronger for maybe a profession or something that they do? Many men use supplements and steroids or drugs, cocaine, i.e., to cut weight because they're going to curb their appetite, or they do it to achieve a certain body image. We know women have done that. We have supplement company. We have people that push out advertising to that. We have done that in men. But stereotypically, we say, yeah, being bigger, stronger is better. Well, whether or not you do it with food, or you do it with a supplement, or you do it with a drug, or you do it with, it doesn't matter. It's all the same exact thing. So when you start talking about that and go, you know what, I chose to use food because it was something easier to control because I didn't want to go do steroids. Now someone's like, oh, okay. Like now it makes more sense. So now when you start talking about it outside of the fluff and someone goes, well, it's a completely different thing. No, it's not. It's the same exact thing. It's just using a different fork in the road to get to the same destination. And when you start talking about where mental health comes, if we were instead of, let's get political here. Instead of everyone trying to take their own segment of mental health, start uniting the roads. Start putting the roads back together and saying, hey, I see you alcoholics. Hey, I see you. Maybe that's not political. I don't know. But like eating disorder, suicide, all these, start taking all these roads and start bringing them closer together and being more collaborative in fashion, because we all don't have to have our own knit. Like we all don't have to sell something. We all need to get together and uniting people to get better. And when we start looking that people are taking multiple avenues to get to the same place, which maybe is not a healthy place, how can we start looking at those roads aren't that dissimilar? Actually, they're very similar. That's where I think it's interesting. And that's where men are, it's constantly misconveyed, because men are just choosing alternate routes and it's not thought of as different. That's what I think that's what the routes the men are taking are stereotypically masculine things. That's just my kind of like, soapbox thing of almost all of mental health and all of health in general, is most people are trying to get to an outcome, first of all, through a healthy or unhealthy way. And sometimes they take it to an extreme, or they do it to cope with something. If someone's been sexually abused, sometimes they can't control their environment, so they control food. Why? Because food's readily available in their house and they have no idea where to get to cocaine. That's why they chose food and not cocaine. Maybe they wanted to use cocaine, they couldn't get to cocaine, they didn't know where to get it. So that's where we start thinking of, oh, well, that was what's readily available was the food. That's why they could make the decision to control the food. When you start thinking about it that way, it gets rabbit hole, but it's interesting.
I mean, it is in my brain right now because I'm thinking about so many men specifically, you know, when I got sober and, you know, some of the fondest memories. This February, I celebrate 11 years of sobriety. And I remember back then, thank you. I remember back during that time, that year after I went to treatment, I stuck around where I got sober. I lived in a halfway house. I did all the things you're supposed to do. I lived the simple life of recovery and, you know, had brotherhood and everything. But, you know, I remember watching so many men in our community go down this rabbit hole, if you will, of now I'm sober, you know, my substances have been taken away. And now it's like every single supplement you can get your hands on, the gym every day, maybe twice a day, doing, you know, all the things and, you know, filling this void. Right. And because it's the next thing that can ease the underlying issue.
So from the treatment perspective, right, clinically, if we look at this clinically, we have to look at problem number one before we can even address problem number two. So if I'm life or death on food, they say no exercise, right? Or I can't exercise because my caloric intake's down, my body, you know, I'm at a high flight risk. We need to solve this before we get to this, before we get to the next step. So clinically, it's not the wrong step, but where we're lacking is after we get, like you mentioned, right? We address the surface level of getting healthy enough where we're not dependent on substance. Then when you get there and you've started that journey in recovery and you're trying to just navigate it, and then you're like, I need to fill you don't intend to fill the void, but you kind of almost naturally start feeling there's something in there, but you don't know why, and you don't even know what's happening. And then you start seeing other things happen. So where the void is in transition there is, I hope, kind of some of the things that I mull my brain over is how can people better be assisted in those steps? Sometimes that's with brotherhood, but then when one guy starts going down a road, like how can you have more in checks and balances in place? So it's not an easy problem to solve. No. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Is it gets very complicated. And that's where my whole thing now is pushing people to say, you need to be self-reflective and you need to be emotionally intelligent enough to be able to sit in your feelings and start identifying yourself when that's happening. Because if you can't identify it yourself, we start running into some issues. So yeah, have your circle of people around you that can identify it, but you have to keep doing the work. It's not something that just stops.
Oof. I could not have said it better myself. So talking about the work and identifying those core underlying issues, those are always what start us off first. So when you were a kid, how did those pop up and when?
You know, this relates to people, and this is why they enjoy talking to me about it, because I don't BS them with you know, I wanted to be, you know, I wanted to have a six pack and I wanted to get it done. And yeah, okay. Well, start diving deeper, right? Think of like what was your favorite, let's think elementary school, right? What was your favorite, like time in elementary school? What part of the day?
Oh gosh. Well, I don't count like a normal kid. I was homeschooled. So
you did? I mean, okay, never mind. Let's think, yeah. So for me, yeah, this is going to be different. Like recess was for me.
Sure.
Right. Stereotypically, recess, kids are playing, you know, dodgeball and all this other stuff. But elementary school, you know, it was like tag, right? Like you'd go play tag, right? And I remember you would sit in class, and I remember like sitting around going like, oh, like that cute girl, is she going to play tag today? Who's going to play tag today, right? And you get the organization of kids, and then all of a sudden it was just like, oh, well, we're going to play tag. And I naturally went tag the cutest girl, of course, just going to happen. And in turn, she's going to tag me. Right. And it's going to be like one of those moments where you're sitting in class. I'm kind of a dreamer in my own mind. And she's going to reach out and go to tag me. And I'm going to be falling backwards, like Matrix style, like sun breaks through the clouds and like, you know, spotlight right on the moment. She's going to like fall face to face, you know, like, yeah, it never happened. You know, like chicks would like run away from me, not because it was tagged, because it was like, hey, there's the cuter boy over there. And so I never got the attention that other guys got, or maybe I did. I just didn't think I did. And so in that moment, I felt dejected. I felt like I was not good enough, right? Now you fast forward and all these people are getting girlfriends and I'm not. Well, why? And then as you start rolling down the snowball, I remember getting to junior high school, a girl dated me for a lunch period because she felt bad for me. And I laugh about it now. And I'm like, yeah, you were stupid. But now, but I remember those moments vividly. I remember the exact shirt I was wearing. I remember saving up all my money back in the day. There was K-Swiss, these white K-Swiss shoes and this Abercrombie like shirt, but it was like long and red with like blue stripe, like outlined in white, and had a white collar. Like I remember that, like to this day, I'll never forget. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I just wanted to be liked. I remember going to like a junior high party and, you'd play like someone play like spin the bottle on the trampoline and like everyone was praying it didn't land on me type of situation, like that type of thing. And it was like the dejection, right? So all those things were happening. And so when I was feeling like I wasn't good enough for people, my body wasn't changing. Other guys were getting facial hair. They were like actually hitting puberty. And I remember going to me and being like, why am I not changing? I can do something about this. And so in junior high school, I got cut from a basketball team because I was dribbling with my head down, which apparently is not a thing you can do. You have to actually look where you're going. So I got cut and my buddy was like, hey, you should get into wrestling. Like you work your ass off. Like, why don't you try wrestling? I think you'd be really good. And when I started learning about how I could control my body and control weight and control, and I could manage how my pounds went up and down. I could manage my exertion. I could see results on a scale or on from a measurement perspective. I then started learn, okay, if I do this, I can control this and that will help me get a girlfriend, help me get a six pack, right? You remember like Abercrombie back in the day, all the dudes had their shirt off on the bag and the girls would carry around like fantasize about it. And I'm like, motherfucker,
Yes.
Were you one of the Abercrombie guys?
No.
You're never a guy
I'm
on
laughing.
The bag,
okay, so full disclosure. No, I wasn't ever. No, but I'm a gay guy. So for us, it was a little the Abercrombie bags for like I think I might have known I was gay when I first saw an Abercrombie bag. So that's why I'm laughing. We all did a lot. We joke about that because
and you see the guy on there and you're like, and I just remember for me, like all the girls, like they have a bag and all the girls are like carrying him around and they were like, did you see my bag? Like, and I'm just like, all right, I just want to be that dude. Like that's all. Like if I can be that guy, like my problems, like they're solved. Right. So I was like, how do you do that? And I was just like, well, the Atkins diet was big at that time, like no carbs. So start that. And that's my mom was doing it. Like I just kind of watched what my mom was doing because she was just trying to lose weight because she just had a baby. Like it's so much more complicated than, oh, this dude just wanted a six pack. No, like there were so many other pieces that I grabbed from here. I grabbed from there. People that go through, like people aren't, I like to think this way. Some people are stupid and they do it really, really stupid. Most people are not stupid. They know what they're doing. They're trying to get to somewhere. And that's okay. And so for me, that's when it kind of started. I was like Abercrombie bags. I kept, and it's a lifetime. It didn't just start one day. Everyone wants the one day what happened. It's never a one day what happened. It's a culmination of all these things leading up. Even if your parent dies, it's not that you just chose to do this one thing. It's the culmination of what chose you to go to alcohol, what chose you to go to an eating disorder. It's because of a lifetime of experiences that make you make that choice. So for me, it's the lifetime leading up to it. And then when I got into wrestling, I learned that food could be controlled. And then when I learned that, and that could allow you to cut weight, when I learned that, that was my outlet. So nothing with food, to be honest with you. I love food. I love cooking. I love food.
Yeah.
But food was the obstacle to get me to standing in my way of getting to where I wanted to go. And I wanted that more. Yeah.
So you, what did the consequences look like as you started down that road of like taking food away? Like so what were you doing? How's it affecting your life?
When I started, it was started by just restricting, right? You'd restrict how much you eat. That would then be calorically less, exercise, but then you start learning more tricks. I can tape trash bags to my body and go turn the steam on a shower and put a stationary bike in the shower and just ride till you pass out and you lose a tremendous amount of weight. Well, it's water weight. It's going to come right back. Like, so it's like, it gives you the rush of I'm getting instant gratification. But it's nothing substantial. And then as you start, I'd skip classes and go to the gym. So, you can start with restricting, exercise, bulimia, then you get to bulimia, and then you go down you can go down the road, start hitting substances. You can go down the road of everywhere. It'd take an hour to go through everything. but you start learning, and then you're not attentive in class, right? Like you're sitting in class and all you're thinking about is my next meal, my next, what is it? My next workout session. What do I need to do? I have this, and mirrors, body check. We always do it, right? You walk past the storefronts in the mirrors and you just like look over and you're like, damn, look pretty good. Or you start critiquing yourself. Right. Those type of things. So for me, it was highlighting why I could see myself doing it. You open up a can of tuna because it was on 10 o'clock at the moment. I had to have something to eat to stay in, but I could only have one little chunk of it at 10 o'clock. So I didn't class, and everyone's like, why the fuck does it smell like fish? And like, it's because I was opening a can of tuna to have the one little chunk at 10 o'clock so I could meet my timing, that type of thing. So yeah, so it consumes your life, right? It becomes your new obsession. That's what happened to me.
So you experienced, I feel like what you just described was a lot of distraction, but did you experience like neurologically, did you ever get to a place where it was interfering with your ability to like your cognition?
Yeah. I mean, you're at a point where you're so malnourished at times that you just have no idea what's going on, right? You're completely, I would say you're not even in the room.
Yeah.
You're somewhere else. But never got to a point. I mean, I had been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, all those things happening during that time. I remember I lost a significant amount of weight. I started seeing my mom had, tried to fix it. She was in medicine. She knew something was going on. She had a
How old were you at this point?
Idea. 16 at the time. I mean, I was going through it for 5 years before I even got to treatment. And that was like my junior year of high school. I got pulled out of baseball. I had lost significant amount of weight in just like 2 days. And they were like, hey, you need to, I was in the therapy room. They carted me off on a stretcher, wouldn't let me leave, took me to the ER, took me to inpatient recovery, right? So it's like people had tried to commit suicide or overdose and like me. And I'm like, why am I here? I just want a six pack. I'm not trying to kill myself, and someone's like, no, you're pretty close. that type of situation. So for me, I never, you don't realize you're that sick because I wasn't actually trying to harm myself. I thought I was trying to better myself. And I think that's a lot of the time where within men, we see that we're like, oh, this is bettering me. I'm getting better, but you don't see the consequences underneath the surface, right? Someone could look really good, but you don't see that they have multiple organ failure happening. That type of thing. That's where mental health comes in.
Sure.
Yeah, it's mental health, but
well, it's and I can't help but think that how it's it's the imbalance, right? Because for I compare it to myself. If I could have a couple drinks and it not and not need to have a lot more or whatever, it wouldn't have been an issue for me. If the same thing, if you can bring in good eating principles and exercise principles without going off the deep end, it's not something, it's a benefit. It's not something harmful. It's the imbalance and the excess, the driven by, like what you mentioned earlier, instant gratification, that we are kind of force fed in our society today, and pop culture, and just that expectation that we're kind of entitled to it, if you will. So you go into treatment, and clearly you're not, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of surrender happening or insight. So what
didn't think I was wrong, right? And then they send you to treatment, and they're like, wait, I gotta go meet here, or like, so you go into treatment, outpatient treatment then, and so you're going through and you're going to your meetings and having to eat food in front of people and all this other stuff. I'm like, wait, you just want me to eat this? Yeah. Well, and then I got to leave and go back. So then I was like, all right, great. I'll eat this and then I'll go work out after, and you had to supposedly log your stuff. It's like, I'm not dumb. Like, I know how I can cheat the system. So, like, that's the problem. Until you get to a point where and this is where treatment and principle within mental health, within all health, is all individual, in my opinion. You can take a broad brush stroke and paint something, but each little hair on the brush is going to have leave a different streak. And where I want to have a different view is, I didn't relate to treatment because I was the only guy in treatment. Who am I supposed to look to that had gone through treatment before, that had experienced something about it? Everybody in the building was female. And that's not to say that their experience is any less than mine or I couldn't learn something from them, but it did not relate to my level, right? So if I'm interested at that time in chicks and I have chicks in the room with me, I don't want them to know something's wrong. Like, sorry,
Right.
that's genetic me as a dude trying to sound bad, hit on chicks. And I'm going to hit on chicks by telling them what's wrong. It's weird. As you get older, it tends to actually work. But back then, I didn't want to do it. So, I think as I learned that, nothing happened for me. You go through the whole process. And then when I got to junior college and I was playing baseball again, my head coach said, I got introduced to sports psychology. And I had never thought about psychology on my own home field within sports. And it was like, how can I be successful or how can I achieve something through my mind rather than my body? That's when it flipped the script for me. And I started learning more about how mentally I can outperform someone mentally. And that will physically it physically helps me. We'll put it that way. So I then knew, and then honestly, a lot of it was education. So as I was still going through the cycle, the revolving door, you start learning what carbohydrates are used for in the body. What is protein used for in the body? What is this used for in the body? And as you start learning more, you start realizing that each individual thing actually in its proper use is quite enjoyable, and performance really it helps you perform at a higher level. And so for me, I started attracting I guess I started looking for knowledge, and I started looking for, instead of saying this is my way of doing it, this is what I know, I'm stubborn going to do it, I was hungry for knowledge. And how could I then use what I was learning through sports psychology, and then being able to kind of highlight like, oh, I'm learning performance tricks with my mind. How can I learn performance tricks with my body? And then I started learning, how do I need to fuel my body to become an elite athlete? That's when the shift started happening. I found my why within recovery. Because people talk about, awesome. Oh, you're in recovery to recover. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm in recovery I want to achieve this outcome. But when you took, this is what you want to do. And they're like, and then traditional recovery will say, if that's what you want to do, you got to eat. That's like a scare tactic to me. That doesn't do anything for me. If someone were to like, okay, how can we use this to help you achieve that? It becomes your why. If you try to do it just to say, I'm going to do like, if you don't eat, I'm not going to let you play baseball. That's a scare tactic.
Right.
But if you say,
so you're basically talking about using positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement.
Yes. And finding within that, instead of catering ourselves and I get it within clinical, right? Like we can't, when someone gets to a certain point, we have to take things away because they can't have that outlet, maybe. But if you're to say, hey, I'm trying to achieve this, how can I use this for there? Or where is the gap there? And when you start diving into their individual situation, you start finding how you can use, alcohol and substance is going to be completely different. You can't use alcohol and substance to enhance performance. Now, can I take the same feeling in that? Many people, like I'll say for me, when I got to the big leagues, I was drinking a ton. Why? Because it numbed the pain. Where was my now healthy numbing? Where can I find healthy numbing of a bad game in performance now? If we talked about me drinking alcohol was to try to do something, for anything else in performance, it wasn't going to do it. But you could relate it to my performance. When I talked to my sports psych person about it, was, hey, how can I relate it outside of, how can I feel this feeling, numbing feeling, which is self-reflection, trying to find that. And then how can I feel that within a healthy way? And now it was our job to go back and forth and find that. How can I battle my deal with my anxiety when it gets to this point without going to something that's going to calm me? How can I then find that? What is that effect? And then in each situation, if it's in the middle of the game, I can't just sit down in the middle of the game and just start like close my eyes and start going through my five senses. Doesn't work.
What were some of the things that you would say helped you the most that were, healthy coping skills through those years?
I didn't get them. I'm still working on them. I mean, you'll know. I mean, you try everything. You try anything and everything at some point.
Yeah.
Like meditating, don't do it. You know, and that's why, you know, you need to meditate. I'm like, meditate. No, like I'm like, nope, not gonna happen. I can't sit in a room still and do it. No, not gonna happen. You know, yoga, I was like, there were cute chicks in there, but like it didn't do anything for me mentally. I just enjoyed the workout and there were cute chicks. You know, I think that's part of like what it is like I'm very driven and a little bit crazy. And I'm okay with that. I'm like, I finally get to the point where I'm like, I kept trying to fight that. And I think you said the word balance. I almost kind of like a hot button topic sometimes. I almost don't believe in balance, because I think if you're doing the thing that inspires you and does you and you're fulfilled by it, you don't need other things. Now, when you're taking things to extremes, 100% you need balance. But like if you're in a healthy space and you're doing what you want to do and you're trying to achieve something great, no one ever achieves something great without having a little crazy in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think like that's what inspires me now, is kind of taking a step back from what I was going out and doing all the time and saying, how can I help people? And I think the way I went to help people was my coping, was taking a step back. I thought my coping was going out and speaking with people. This is really helping me. It actually hurt me more, because I wasn't in a position to talk about it, because I was talking about things I wasn't inspired about. Hey, you should meditate. You should do this. Here's the PR statement that we want to go around. We want to highlight these exact topics. And when you start going through it and you're like, I don't practice that though. That's not my experience. It sounds good, but it's not who I am. And when I finally took a step back, I realized that most of the things that I was talking about, I didn't truly believe in, because it wasn't my experience. It was at some point, but it didn't work for me. So sure, does meditation work for some people? Sure, it's not my thing. What's my thing? Going for a walk. I love going for walks. And someone's like, well, it's why? Well, I'm still being like physically active, but I like to think. My mind goes really, really fast. If you couldn't tell, I talk fast, things just move fast for me. But what I do is it slows me down enough to think. And sometimes when I start walking too fast, I drag my feet. And it's a reminder for me to slow down. I got that from Nelson Cruz, who's one of the best hitters in all of baseball, who, when he walks the home plate, drags his feet. Well, why do I do that? Because I learned it from the sports side guy in him. Well, why do I have my walks now? Because it slows me down. So it's little things like that. It's not like something revolutionary. Like I sit down, I do my morning routine is this, and I do this. I don't have one of those. I just feel. If I'm speeding up really fast, I need to slow down. I'll go for a walk, or
we can't fly by something you just said. If you need to do something, if you need to feel something, and I think that you hit the nail on the head, is that with all of these things that we're talking about, in so many ways, we're the unhealthy parts of it that are happening are direct result of us not wanting to feel discomfort. And and so, I mean, whether it's, doing something to force ourselves to feel something different, or doing something to force ourselves to feel nothing, that's what I'm talking about. When I talk about the imbalance, it's like we go on this extreme end, the extreme ends one way or another.
Well, we have to highlight that, right? Because that's the way our society works. Boring and normal does not sell. Okay, I'm not even gonna get into politics. Look at politics right now.
Yeah.
Look into division right now. Creating division sells.
Yep.
Inciting division sells. Picking, and not just politically. You can go anything. You create division and you don't create unity. You create sales, because you create solutions to a problem that you have then created. So if you want to look at business, create division and you will succeed in sales.
Yep.
Because you're artificially creating problems. And our society and country have done that. Now you mix that with instant gratification and you have a sales funnel that is faster than anything. You create a problem and you make sure that people want this solution right away. And when you do that, what you're doing is you are spiking sales of something. This world is built on money, power, and sex. And if you truly don't believe that that's the case, go look at any sort of thing in the world.
Yeah.
And so when you actually look at it and you say, okay, what am I doing? But just like you said, when there is something of discomfort, we try to fix it like that because we have so many things that are instant gratification that we have everything at our fingertips now. So now we're trying to create the solution that's now. And just like you said, sometimes we have to slow down. I heard one of the best answers ever was my grandfather. And he always say, if you need an answer from me right now, it's no. And if you give me time to think about it, it's a maybe. And that one has stuck out with me forever because it's like, you're not going to push me into making a decision right now. Let me think about it. Let me weigh my option. Let me think about what's at, and then I will make my decision. That is, I think, how we need to handle if we could start doing that more.
Yeah.
As people, we would be healthier, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
impulsivity is one of the things that gets us is our Achilles heel. I mean, really for anybody. So
it's a weird topic to be in, but I love it. I love it.
So, okay. So talking, you mentioned, instant gratification, wanting to, either wanting to solve the problem or fix things instantly or change the way I feel instantly. The solution to dysfunction and our unhealthy coping skills, it's not instant gratification either. So you go to treatment, you do these things, you do sports psychology, we're talking about how you're still trying, like many of us are, on a path of recovery, finding things that help us to cope in a healthy way. But, so leading into your professional sports career, later on in high school and college, and can you describe what that looked like? And when did you know that you were going to go pro? And
no idea. This is what's funny about, I was thinking about this. I've never said, it's funny. I love talking with you about this because I didn't know I was going to go pro, right? And I just thought about this, made this connection. I had no idea I was going to go pro. In high school, I was just trying to play, and I got recruited by nobody. I went to junior college, and I got redshirted my first year because I wasn't good enough to play. Then I somehow just work my ass off, and then I get to the next level, and I go to Long Beach, and no idea who anybody knows me or anything, and I just play my ass off and keep working my ass off, and pretty sure I'm in the next. And then I'm, okay, I got drafted. Well, now I'm almost cut. I'm 26A, but okay, I'll just work my ass off and just keep working and working and working. It's almost like a game of attrition. Can you outlast? And I think the same thing goes is I had no idea, right? I just did. And then I wind up in the big leagues one day. Now, granted, there's a ton of crap and stuff along the way. Take forever to talk about every little thing. But at the end of the day, recovery is the same thing. It's a game of attrition. Can you outlast yourself from the day before? I was literally just trying to make it so I could play next year. And then you get to that point and you're like, well, made it this far. Let's see if I can play the next year. And then you go to the next one, can I get to the next level? Then can I get to the next level? I think that's one thing that I just relate to kind of almost in recovery is you almost you're just playing to get to the next day. And sometimes you're at first you're playing to get the next day, then you're playing to get the next week, then you're playing to get next month, and then you're playing to get the next year. And then pretty soon the snowball starts rolling for you in the right direction. And I think that's what my recovery looked like, especially from baseballs. I had no idea. I was a nobody, and I just worked my ass off and somehow made it. But I think largely it's because I didn't give up. I didn't just say okay, fine, this is what it is. I was 26 in A-ball. I'm still 4 levels away from the big leagues. And I got basically was told I was going to be the bullpen catcher one day. And you're off the roster, you're going to be a bullpen catcher. And I was just so my career's done. And I was fine. If my career's done, I'm going to have fun and I'm just going to work my ass off. And I'm just going to enjoy it. Well, we got a guy that got moved up, guy that broke his hand punching a water cooler. And they were like, hey, have you played first base before? I was yeah, that's my best position. Never played it before in my life. And I went off to lead the league in slugging percentage, led the league in home runs. Next year, I'm back catching. was like an all-star that year, tore my quad in the middle of the season. And then in AAA, they told me like, you're going to start on the bench, or you're going to be off the roster. You're going to be a bullpen catcher again. And I was like, I was just an all-star. And again, I got to this point where I was like, fine, I'm just going to enjoy it. Finally in AAA. And then we had a guy get claimed off waivers. And then I started catching. I hit homers in like 3 straight games off of like the top 3 prospects in all of baseball. And then I got noticed. And then they were like, do you want to keep catching, or do you want to go to a different? I was like, I'll keep catching. And then I started for the International League and the All-Star game for AAA. So like I had all these things happening, and there's weird stories happening, but like they're not, it's outlast. I think recovery is kind of the same way, is you're just outlasting your impulses. You're outlasting yourself. And because it's not going to go away.
I feel like a lot of there's a lot of parallels to be drawn in life, but especially even in like business and corporate America, so much of it is, just continue to do your best and outlast, because like people like people end up leaving, people end up whatever, and they've got to replace, they're going to look to the pool for somebody next.
And your quality, right? What's my quality? And you can definitely take it to extremes, but what's my quality? Who am I as a person? Am I a person that is, and this is more or less when we draw back to recovery or just performance in general as a human being, or in who you want to be. What do you identify as? Right? Everyone talks about we're the sum of like the 5 people we hang around the most, or whether you're the sum of the 3 people you hang around the most. Well, you hang around yourself every freaking day. So you're the sum of the 3 or 5 thoughts you think about the most.
Yep.
So what are those? Okay, take sports psychology. And for me, you want to be an elite athlete and you want to be one of the 30 best in the world at what you do. Yeah, I'm going to take that and start incorporating that in my life. So what allowed me to be successful there is going to allow me to be successful here. Everything that you have, when I tell everybody, everything that you have is you have everything you have that you need for recovery. You have everything you need. You don't need anything else. You don't need to go buy some ebook. You don't need to go follow some Instagram person to tell you exactly what you need. Everything that you need is right inside you. If you could sit with yourself and experience the discomfort of what it's like to sit in a room with your own thoughts, and you can navigate those, you will get better. But not a lot of people are willing to do that because they're afraid of what they find. Yep. And they don't want to give in to what they find. They don't want to surrender to their what they've done, or the way they've thought about themselves, or they've thought about others. If you were to do that, forgive yourself, forgive others, and sit in a room by yourself with your own thoughts, and you can do that, you'll be stronger than 90% of the people in this world.
When do you feel like you first started to do that on
bus rides?
When?
Bus rides in minor leagues. Because you had to sit alone on a bus with freaking 50 dudes, and you're on a bus, sitting on a bus for 14 hours from Savannah, Georgia to Lakewood, New Jersey, or you're driving through Waterloo, Iowa to Missouri. So you're sitting on a bus for hour upon hour, watching the freaking trees go by. If you're lucky enough to have trees, you sit there and you have to sit in your own thoughts, and you have to ponder, why did I just went 0 for 4. What could happen? What in this? And you start realizing that I drive a lot, and some of the time I never even turn the stereo on. Sometimes I never have a podcast on. Sometimes I'm just driving in a car thinking.
Now. Do that on purpose.
Now. And a lot of that,
same thing.
Yeah. So when you start thinking about it, a lot of us turn on something to avoid that.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that, be a weirdo and just never listen to music or never listen. I'm not saying it like that. Like, you need to just, listen to a podcast and better yourself every day. Look, some days I don't want to hear nothing. I just want to go in a freaking hammock and lay by a creek and listen to the water go by. And I don't want to hear a word from somebody. Some days I need my cup filled by social, by interaction. Our cup's going to get filled differently every day. And for me, learning that, what did I need in a given moment? I'll tell you this: sit in a room alone with your thoughts and try to feel yourself out and realize how uncomfortable it is. And then keep trying to do that. And you'll start realizing what your body is craving. not even what is your mind craving? And when you do that, you're like, okay, what do I need in this given circumstance that is going to help me in the direction that I want to go? And then, is that healthy for me? Is that the thing that I should be doing? It helps. I'm not going to say it solves everything. It helps.
When did you, so you start this process of self-acceptance and embracing your own thoughts and your own realities about your life and who you are and your goals and aspirations. I'm curious, when do you feel like you started to embrace like the full perspective of what, I understand what you were saying, that like, younger, you all of a sudden got the drive to, you got into sports psychology, you approached nutrition differently and what have you. But was there a point where you started to assess what had been happening with your relationship with food and exercise and called it what it was and started to embrace, like, okay, this was taking my life down a negative path, and you really see that for what it was, and leading to, obviously, you became an advocate at some point, but it wasn't always like that. Like, you lived in a space of denial. So where's that transition? How did it take place?
It's still happening, right? So let me give you an example here. We know, would you agree that obesity is a problem in our country?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we say that food is not the problem, I mean, we'll have you eat, I'm going to get a bunch of crap from eating disorder people on this. And they're going to say, well, you're okay. Look, not everybody can have an eating disorder. Okay. Some people don't have the motivation or the drive to do it. So Here's the thing. Is there health in any size? In my opinion, no. Is that going to piss off eating disorder people? Yes. Why? Because obesity is a problem. Obesity is a problem, right? It is linked to many, many, many health issues. The list can go on forever and ever and ever. Okay. So as I get older, okay, and if my body, I've disregarded my body and I've gotten to be where obesity or maybe being overweight has now taken a toll on me for health reasons, but I have an eating disorder past. I need to be able to navigate healthfully losing weight with diet, not with other crap, with food as fuel and nutrition as medicine. So using food as medicine for my body. And how can I then incorporate that into my life? Will I be over fascinated by it? Yeah, my mind will probably start going that way. So I put barriers in place. Maybe I have a group of people that hold me accountable for where I'm at. Right. So I create that environment around. That's where my mind goes now, is from the long-term perspective of self-acceptance and all that. I still don't accept myself. I try on a daily basis, but I try to feel where I'm at, be where my feet are at if I feel where I'm at. And then what I try to do is now rationalize, okay, what is good for me? I need cognitively working what is good for me. Or I feel really lethargic today, or I feel like I had a bunch of crap. Well, naturally, I want antioxidants because I am naturally going to be inclined to wanting that. My body is craving that. So I'll go get a bunch of berries and I'll have some, and I'll just mix that. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm feeling really dull today. Like, I really need to pick me up. I definitely need some simple carbs. So I'll add that into my diet. And I don't really think about food all that much now, but I know kind of generally what each thing does. And I just assess where I'm at. I try not to overthink it. I try not to be a person that says, this is exactly how much I need of this, and I need this, I need this. I just say, what is going to positively, what can I have that's going to add to what I need? So if I feel like I'm craving freaking pizza, I go have pizza. If I feel like I'm craving something, I go enjoy it. Now, within that same essence, I'm still not going to be oblivious and say I can eat anything I want and drink anything out and do all this other stuff. I can't be oblivious that way. But I know that I'm almost kind of in the notion, I'm kind of like playing for the tie almost. Like, not that I like, okay, I had a really bad day. Now, we get the binge cycle. But I start looking and saying, like, what does my body want? I really feel like I just went on a heavy run, or I didn't do anything today. That's fine. I'm not going to change my diet. But if I feel myself want something, then I make the adjustment. Again, I can't prescribe a notion, and I will never say to somebody, here's your recipe for recovery. Just do this and you'll be recovered. Honestly, the worst thing I can say that people are going to hate is I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer for anybody. I just know that for me, I'm still trying to navigate it. I'm still trying to find fun ways to incite my mind.
So you made it to Major League Baseball. Something that was many people have a dream of. Say, wow, you finally made it. What did it feel like when you were there? And what did you feel like you had made it?
No, not really. I felt like for me, getting back to the big leagues was not, or, getting to the big leagues, yeah, it's a childhood dream because your parents are, excited. You're like mom and dad and grandparents, and we're like crying that you're there. Like that's a cool thing. But, for me, it was a culmination of a lifetime of hard work. So when you get there, it's pretty cool to see that to realize you're one of like the 30 best in the world at what you do. Like it's pretty cool to have that, that dream to come to fruition. But the work doesn't stop. I think we realize that is like, there is no destination. You're done, like there's just there. And then that's part of the next chapter of the journey, to say.
Yeah. So, I heard you talk about in another time of telling your story, that the destination addiction. We go, like, we get to where we think we finally want to be and arrive at, and we realize that we're only looking for whatever the next thing is because we don't feel like we've gotten there. So when that happened, when that happened for you and you're at this place, what was your thought process?
Well, I remember being in San Francisco, and we're about to play the Giants, and being from Northern California, everybody's at home, and it's opening day for the Giants in 2018. And I remember being there, and my parents being like, "Hey, after the game, let's go out to dinner." And I've got like, physical therapists in my room doing work. I've got my iPad, phone, computer, going through scattering reports and all this other stuff. And I was like, no, can't do it. I didn't enjoy where I was. I wasn't enjoying where my feet were at because I was so worried about staying there. So worried about the next game. Well, I'd say it this way. I was probably more mentally unhealthy in the big leagues than I was on my, grueling grind through the minor leagues. Well, why? Because I was just trying to stay there. I was trying to, we learn this when you finally achieve the body you want. It's probably more stressful trying to keep the body you want than it was trying to get to the body you want. And that's where, we realize that just getting somewhere doesn't mean that you've made it. It just means that you've created a new context for, it's your new normal.
Yeah.
Right. If I get $1 million, I'll be happy. If I make $100,000 a year, I'll be happy. Well, why is it $100,000? Well, because it's a round number and it's 6 figures.
Right.
So we put ourselves in these limiting beliefs, and then you get to the $100,000 and you go, well, okay, I can do that. Now I need the next thing. And so we're constantly chasing to try to be something. And I think that's where what I try to do is take more logical steps, start with the end in mind and work backwards. And when I did that, it was, okay, what did I want? And I never was able to create that for my baseball career outside of just getting to the big leagues. I never had that next thing. I was just kind of like, okay, I made it. Now I'm just going to try to hold on. So I was playing scared versus playing with ambition to what my next was.
Oof, doing things out of fear is never it never goes in our favor as humans.
It never does. But it's a very valuable feeling. It's a very valuable tool. And I think that's where I think we need to do a better job of explaining many different feelings that we view as negative, right? So look at manipulation, for example. Look at people talk about personality traits all the time in mental health, and they say, well, I'm a perfectionist, like it's a problem, or something like that. See, yeah, like, but here's the thing, yeah, being perfectionist, yeah, does it drool on you? Sure. But flip that on its head. Instead of using perfectionist, what if I'm detail oriented? Right? Or if I'm manipulative. Okay, I don't know many manipulative people that are dumb. What they're trying to be manipulative about, or what they're doing, is dumb, but they're not dumb. They're trying to think a few steps ahead to stay ahead of you or a situation. They're not dumb. They're actually probably pretty resourceful.
I think it's an interesting term when we hear people talk about, oh, somebody is manipulative, because in reality, those of us who live in society and work with each other, work alongside, live in fellowship and commune with each other. Technically, we're all manipulating each other's behavior constantly. It's part of living in and so
It's a society and it's a culture and it's a
yeah,
living organism, right? Just like we are
yeah,
the culture, our framework of knowledge is constantly changing. Not using like the
yeah.
Matrix as an example, but what I think for more people is I'm not saying overthink. I'm not trying to portray this idea of I need to sit in my emotions all the time,
Hmm.
but be reflective of them. Do I need to sit here and worry about what I'm eating every single day? No. At one point in my life, I was. Do I need to sit here and think about what am I thinking about every single second of every single day? No, that's freaking exhausting, right? And we hate being in relationships, at least for me, for myself, is when someone starts like the psychobabble BS and they start trying to tell me like, oh, that's why you're feeling this way. You're trying like sometimes I don't even want to hear why you think I'm acting a certain way. I just want you to just shut up and listen to me.
Hmm.
Or I need to be that person. Now, if we want to take this a step like going even deeper, maybe I need to be that person for someone else. You want to be a really good partner in your relationship. Not that I am probably the one to be able to give relationship advice. Start listening to understand rather than trying to talk to be understood. And so when you hear what they're trying to say and what you need, you will be a better partner. And in turn, that person will start doing that for you. That's just a given in any aspect of life. But we try to manipulate context uh, into something we think it should be, rather than just listening and trying to feel how it needs to move, and then we can just go with the flow. So when people say go with the flow,
Hmm.
it's not you just sit here and don't care. Just try to understand the situation, and if you can, you'll better put yourself where your feet are at.
Well, and it's so applicable what you're saying. I hear you saying that both in relation to other humans, but in relation to ourselves. Like, right? It's the art of finding fine tuning our listening skill to hear, what our own needs, feelings, fears, problems are, discomforts, and also those around us. And
So
so
we do that. We
yeah.
do that. Just like when you talk about your experiences and who you are, it
Hmm.
relates to people in a different context, right? You
Hmm.
being a gay guy, me being a straight guy, we may have different experiences on the way things happen exteriorly from what the
Hmm.
surface level looks like, but the feelings aren't any different deep down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where I think people relate, right? You going through substance and alcoholism may not relate directly to eating disorder behavior, but you relate to the underlying feelings of what is going on
Sure.
within that framework. That's where we, I think, can find common ground rather than putting assertions on somebody and saying you don't understand.
Oh,
No,
absolutely.
I do. It's just in a different framework.
Mhm.
And that's where I think we can understand people better by taking
Mhm.
their framework or their what their overarching theme is of what they may be talking about and then putting it in our own framework. We do
Yeah.
that, we're better. And that's where I think self-respect comes in, and then treating other people with respect.
So true. So, you're at this place of, at your career doing, playing pro ball, and you decide to make a change. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision, why you did it, and what life looked like after that?
Yeah. So long story, I guess, trying to concise down. Got sent down to the minor leagues, was in the big leagues, got sent down to the minor leagues, was down there for a few months. And then was living with a buddy and his fiance, now wife at the time. And they had a wedding in July and went to work out one day at the gym, right? Off days, and go ride on a bike and stretch out and take an off day and do nothing. And got a call that I had tested positive for a performance enhancing substance and that they were going to give me an 80-game suspension or walk away from the game, or 80-game suspension, the press release, you can walk away from the game. And I just got done doing a bunch of advocacy work and all this other stuff. And come to find out, I had tried some of the pre-workout that they had a weight cutter in. So now I'm stuck between a decision to walk away from the game or have what I felt like was my reputation be tarnished. And
Wow.
so that's called a trauma for people that don't believe that traumas exist or think that, it has to be something that's a trauma. And so I chose to walk away because I wanted to continue to help people. And so I had traveled around, did all the speaking, did all the stuff of talking to people. And what I found was I was still living what I felt like was a lie. I felt like I was living something where in hindsight, I should have just come and said, hey, I was living with a buddy and sorry, this is what happened. And unfortunately, and just told the truth right away. And instead I tried to hide what happened because I felt like I was convicted of something I didn't do. And I think that that's when we start coming around to the notion that should I have just been honest with the way I was feeling and what I was doing? Yeah, I should have, but I tried to protect. We get in protection mode, right? I'm getting attacked.
Yeah.
And so I went and started speaking. And everything that I shared is the truth, but wanting to share in the way I did, it wasn't true to everything. And I think that's where a part of what the angst and the things that I feel in life now, especially talking about the subject, is because I wasn't speaking from I wasn't speaking from where I wanted to speak from. I was speaking from a platform that I felt like I had to be on, not from the platform that I chose to speak from. And that's kind of different. So, I walked away from speaking for a little bit in essence, because I needed to find my voice. And I think one of the things that stood out for me more than anything, and now doing within business and having multiple ventures and continuing to do some speaking stuff, and I will be doing more coming up, but largely it's taking I need to find my voice. I need to find why I'm going to speak, right? Why is my reason to share my story? And I haven't found that yet. Before, it was thrust upon me because I was not to say the only guy talking about it. I was a predominant figure talking about it. Not that it was like I'm really anything special. It just was, I was the person talking about it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't from when I wanted to talk about it or how I wanted to talk about it. And that's what I think is different is I think right now, I didn't want to be one of those people that was just out there throwing my voice at things and calling it what it is and being a raw person when it wasn't. I didn't have my why.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I've backed off. And I wanted to be more intentful about what my message was going to be. I didn't want it to be, hey, we all deal with mental health. Wow. Like, great. No, like, I hope people can tell, like, I'm raw. I'm extremely raw. I'm extremely brash. I'm not going to sugarcoat shit. I'm going to tell you the way it is, because at the end of the day, where we're at, most of the people that end up in some point in recovery, they're at rock bottom.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try to relate to someone and be like, hey, if you get to recovery, you can get here. Like, no, that's not me. I'm the dude that's just going to be raw, and I want to be able to speak and people can hear the conviction in my voice that I hear you, I see you. I may not know what you're going through directly, but I know from the framework of what it feels like to be where you're at. That's what I want to be able to be conveyed in my message. And that's why I've taken a big step back.
That's awesome. I love one of the biggest things that for me, in early recovery, one of the biggest things that made an impact in my ability to get and stay sober was hearing other people's stories of recovery from all things. It was really hard for me to pay attention. Like my brain was kind of fried. My attention span had a really difficult time. And I think a lot of people from the addiction side of things, when they first get into recovery, experience a similar thing to me. So sharing that with you kind of behind my why for doing this podcast is reaching people with various stories of recovery from various avenues of getting there, because I'm such a firm believer in that. So many of us can get these little nuggets of truth. Somebody may be listening or watching your story right now, and 90% of it wasn't for them, but the 10% that was is something that they're going to remember for decades, and they're going to come back to, and it's going to impact their life.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What's your why? That's what that was my next thing to ask you. It was like, what is your why for it? So I'm glad you shared that.
Absolutely. So, and it's something that to be the full disclosure, this is only a tiny part of my job at Promises, is doing this podcast, but it's the thing that feeds me in many ways the most, because I know how much power is within each story, and transmitting that power in stories, especially through the last 2 years of the pandemic and what have you, have the technology to do this. I think there's so much power there, to change the world for the better. And
what would you like to see
people's
in
lives.
mental health?
That's a good question. I don't have the answers. I don't know where we need to end up. I would like to see, though, a shift to where I think that, along the same lines of what you said, more connection and solidarity in the direction that we're moving, rather than things being siloed. There, from whether you're talking about going to a treatment centers themselves, private practice, all together, there's not enough collaboration, either in many ways, when it comes to the dialogue, breaking stigma, raising money and awareness for causes and things like that. It's all separated. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I wish I had the answers, but I do think that man, crossing over our resources and our efforts and our whys, like my why changes a lot. Yeah, I've got my cool story that I say, and I don't know how cool it is, but it's, it's when people ask me this, it's what I tell them. And, but little parts to my why change regularly. And it's because I have conversations with people like you that get me fired up about a certain thing. And it's like, for a minute, I'm like, there are certain things that get going with me, as far as like ideas and initiatives. And I go back to our marketing team and I'm like, hey, what are we doing with this? So
That's I think insightful. But you see, that's where I think we miss the mark, is we go out to say something, and we go out to push or amplify our voice, and we want to raise awareness on something, but we don't. Okay, you think about this in business, and you'll relate to this: is everyone has ideas, not many people execute.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm going to start a podcast. Well, haven't you done it? Well, I got to wait till this, or I got to wait till that. You finally get to the point. I talked to all my buddies, and for some reason I have a really great connection with just gentlemen that are gay. I have a great connection with them because they relate to my story, and we relate to each other's thing, because they go, "You're hiding something," and I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "Because I know what you're doing," and I'm like, why?" And then we dive in, but we have a connection, because one day, one of my buddies says, "Hey, you remember when you talked about your story and you said that you felt like you were living a lie, you were doing something and you were speaking, but you didn't feel like you had your reason, and you were afraid of what people were going to say to you." And this was even before, when I talked about like the whole thing of me being done in baseball. And I was so afraid of, am I going to talk about it? Am I going to talk about it? And he said, "Dude, I've been dealing with that for like 30 years. He goes, "You know what it was like to try to keep inside me that like I didn't want my parents or my family or my friends or anybody to know." He goes, "The people that are going to love you are going to love you, and the people that are going to hate you are going to hate you. And guess what? Who cares? The people that love you are going to love you." And I literally was just like, that gave me the courage. It had nothing, it had him just owning his own personal story, owning his voice, and saying, "You know what? This is going to be me, and I'm going to do it." And then for him to do that gave me the strength and power to do it on my own too. Now, again, completely different,
right.
But inside, the feeling, the emotion of what it's like to have to live in what you feel like is a secret, or what you feel ashamed for at times, or what people, there's so much strength and power in that. And I think that's where the mental health community should be taking a step forward, is I see you, not for what the label of the diagnosis or symptom is, but I see you for who you are and what you are as the individual, not as the label that's on you. That's where I think, you know what I mean? And now, not
yeah,
but like, I see you for you. I don't see you because anything, and I may be wrong. I may judge you exteriorly differently than who you are, but enlighten me on who you are. If people had that framework of what it was and what it is, we would then make headway that's far greater, because we are now focusing on the individual rather than what it looks like from the outside, from a stereotypical level. That's what I think is amazing and powerful about what we can do as individuals collectively, as a group and as a space. So that's what kind of blows my mind is it doesn't matter where you come from. Again, I don't have a rags to riches story. I'm not freaking rich. I didn't come from I'm just a normal person that dealt with crap, and I did something cool in my life. So it somewhat gives me a platform to be able to speak from, I guess. But if I never made it to the big leagues, guess what? We would probably never be having this conversation. And I was there for 20 days. It's not like I'm some magical creature that just did something. But I have somewhat of a voice. I get to speak from it now, I guess. So I'm going to try to just say it. But I also don't want to be the sugarcoat person that just is the stereotypical motivational person that tells you that you can get through recovery. No, this is raw. It's hard. And having conversations like this, I hope elaborate and just say that people from different places in the world, doesn't matter sex, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, it doesn't matter any of those. It's the fact that we can all get together, maybe not agree on everything, but we're able to have a conversation about it. And we're able to say, you know what, I hear what you're saying. I can see you for you. I think that's invaluable.
So true. So true. I couldn't agree more. All right. So last question for you. What do you want to leave with anybody who's been listening today and they say, I'm really relating to a big piece of his story and I'm still struggling?
Just acknowledging you're struggling is number one. And we don't give ourselves enough credit for that. Right. So my big thing is, I say self-reflection and all that. I'm not saying you have to have the answer. Right. What I want people to know is you don't need the answers. Just knowing there's a problem is 95% of the issue. Right. That's if you know that there's a problem and you can look yourself and say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. There is I do. And maybe it isn't a problem. Maybe it's just the start of something. You're you know what, man, I'm struggling with this. There are the resources. They're getting the resources to help you is not hard. That's literally the easiest thing in the world. It's getting somebody to acknowledge that, hey, maybe I do need some help, or maybe that I do need to take this step in this right direction. You don't have to go ask for help right away.
Yeah.
You can go and just be hey, you know what? Maybe I'm just going to go for a walk and just think about some things that have happened in my life. Think about look up epigenetics. And if people never heard about epigenetics, I don't know crap about it, but I do know that they did studies based on the fact that, when a woman is born, they're born with the reproductive eggs they're going to have for life. And then so that means when you're in your mother's womb, or when your grandmother was pregnant with your mom, you were theoretically in your mother's body when she had birth to you. So the choices that your grandmother made could effectively affect you as
right.
either generational, down the line, right? Okay. So if that's the essence, recovery is not about you. Recovery is about bigger than you. And even if you don't want to have kids, or if you don't think about it that way, think of the traces upon where you are and the choices that you make. So the stressors that are in your life can affect. They looked at soldiers from the Civil War, any famine, Irish potato famine. UCLA did a study on it. And what they found was people that had the most amount of time in those stressful conditions, their offspring had had a lower life expectancy than the ones that spent zero time or less time in those stressful situations. So if you're in one of those situations, let's just start by acknowledging it and lowering that stress level and lowering that level of anxiety in the place you're in. Be accepting of it. And then let's start by taking one step at a time. Right? If you struggle getting out of bed in the morning, don't get all the way out of bed. Just get your feet on the ground for the day and then hop back in. And then let's do 2 feet the next day. And let's start the snowball rolling. That's what I hope my story provides. I'm not going to give people answers. I don't have all the answers, but I hope I can be the spark that says, hey, let's get the snowball rolling down the hill. That's where I think the biggest thing is. And I think just acknowledging where you're at, that's the biggest step.
Couldn't agree more. Michael, thank you so much. Marjama. Did I say it right?
Both
Okay.
times you said it right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, man. We jumped a few hurdles. We got it done. I'm really grateful for you taking the time to schedule this in, make it happen. We really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks. Hey, this is what it's like. This is recovery, right? Things happen. Right. We get it back on track. We get it, and it's good. So
resiliency, yes. All right. Thanks to you. Thanks to everybody watching, listening, and with that, we are out.
For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. Recovery Stories is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please share with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. We are grateful for you and hope that you have been encouraged by today's episode. As always, remember you are only one decision away from a completely different life, and it is never too late to start loving yourself.